Hello and welcome to SciFi Mineshaft. Now, I know what you're thinking. How can a movie titled The Robot vs. the Aztec Mummy be anything but absolutely fantastic? Well, let's find out. Cue title card. The Robot vs. the Aztec Mummy is a 1958 thing, which is sort of a film and is sort of sci-fi horror. Now, I say sort of because it's not really any of these things. The movie is only 65 minutes long, which in itself is not exactly an issue. I don't mind a film being short, just like I don't mind a film being long. A film should only be the length it needs to be, and the growing trend of making a film 2.5 to 3 hours long when it really doesn't need to be annoys me quite a bit. The issue with this film, however, is it is only 65 minutes long, and yet in those 65 minutes it is crazily disjointed, really quite confusing, and almost entirely told in flashbacks. And I really do mean almost entirely told in flashbacks. As I said, it's an hour-long film, and the first 45 minutes of the film is entirely flashbacks. And not flashbacks done well, mind you. It's literally a guy standing in a room full of people saying, "Do you remember when this happened?" It plays a long, very out-of-place flashback, and then everyone says, "Yes," and then he goes on to say, "Well, after that, this happened," and then we're treated to yet another terrible, disjointed flashback. And when I say these flashbacks are long, I mean they are long. As I mentioned earlier, this movie is only an hour in length, and yet one of the flashbacks is about 20 minutes long. The first 45 minutes of the movie was so poorly edited, so disjointed, and so utterly baffling that I actually got out of my chair, went over to the computer, and googled the movie to see if I could figure out what the hell was going on. And then it all made sense. To quote Wikipedia, my primary source of research directly, the film is a sequel to The Aztec Mummy and The Curse of the Aztec Mummy, both released earlier that year, and a large portion of the film consists of an extended recap of the first two entries in the series, and my god does it show! It might, on the surface, sound like an impressive feat to release 3 movies in 1 year, but let's actually sit down and think about it. This movie is 60 minutes long. The first 45 minutes is a flashback consisting of the first 2 movies. That means that this movie is only about 25 minutes of original footage, aside from the footage of people sitting down talking about the previous 2 films. Now, I've not seen, nor do I have any inclination to see after watching this movie, the first 2 movies in this here trilogy, but I can only assume the second movie is probably largely recapping the first movie, and judging by the footage of the first 2 movies that I've seen in the third movie, neither of those 2 movies were actually very good. But the fact that this third movie is 75% a recap of the first 2 movies brings me to the next point. It is not really that much of a sci-fi. Because, as you might have guessed from the titles The Aztec Mummy and The Curse of the Aztec Mummy, the first 2 movies were not sci-fi films. They are instead your average mummy movie ordeal, with there being a reincarnation of an ancient lover, some curse where a mummy's coming back alive, ancient jewelry, all that sort of jazz. The only thing that really distinguishes it in any way from the earlier, better Hammer mummy movies is that it's actually set in Mexico. So what we're seeing is not Egyptian iconography, but instead Aztec. Unfortunately, however, this distinction alone was not enough to save it. Although, I might actually check out the first in the franchise, because if it wasn't for the disjointed, annoying flashback nature we saw the footage in, it might have actually been enjoyable. Well, maybe not enjoyable, but at least not excruciatingly painful to sit through. The way the sci-fi element is eventually introduced into this movie is that there's a criminal known as the Bat who wants to steal some jewelry from the mummy. Whenever items are taken from the mummy pursues the thief, gets back the items, and usually messes up those who have taken them pretty bad. Knowing this, the master criminal, the Bat, breaks into the mummy's tomb while the mummy is sleeping, stares at him for a while, and then thinks, "Oh, I know how to solve this issue. I will build a robot to fight the mummy." That's ridiculous! The mummy is asleep! You're standing next to the mummy while it's currently dormant! Just set the thing on fire and take the items! That's how any regular person would kill an evil undead mummy! But I digress! After 46 minutes, the flashbacks finally end and the characters say, "Oh, hey, maybe we should actually start doing the film now," and the sci-fi elements begin. They walk into the Bat's headquarters and then immediately captured, which is good because then we can get some exposition, and considering we haven't had exposition for, I don't know, maybe a solid 20 seconds, I was starting to go into withdrawal. The main characters are tied up, and you would never guess what the bad guy does.
He starts monologuing.
So we're told in painful detail his terrible plan, which takes up about 8 minutes of the 25 minutes of this entire original part of the film. The robot is brought to life, which probably in days gone by would have reminded me of Frankenstein, but these days instead just invoked Star Wars Episode 3 for me, and we're shown its terrible capabilities, or more accurately how terribly incapable it is.
I want you to stop and think about this. A new kind of world. An army of robots obeying me.
That's your plan? You're going to take over the world with an army of slow-moving robots? People can escape by just literally walking away from them. And also, while we're on the subject, those are not robots. At best they're androids, and at worst it's a guy cosplaying as a vending machine. Poorly. And then finally, after 1 hour and 2 minutes of patient waiting, the robot and the Aztec Mummy finally actually face each other. But, may I remind you, this movie is only about 1 hour and 5 minutes long, so you can imagine that this fight does not last very long at all. To save you the time of watching this movie, what has been playing while I've been describing this fight scene is literally the entirety of the fight scene. This is a film called The Robot vs. the Aztec Mummy, which is literally less than 1 minute of a robot fighting an Aztec mummy. I have suffered sneezes that lasted longer than that entire fight. But whatever, the robot is defeated, the mummy goes back to bed, and the movie is over. So there you have it, The Robot vs. the Aztec Mummy, an utterly disappointing train wreck of a film that does nothing but play on our hopes of seeing a robot beating up on a mummy. Thanks for watching, and as always, until next time, I have been and still am Grim Grindle.
I decided to create a man. A breathing body. A real man. And I have made that dream come true. There you have the greatest creation of man's intelligence. A human robot, Doctor. This thing I created has enormous power.